The recently released Red Dead Redemption 2 is a commercial behemoth and is similarly well received by critics in the gaming press. It will stand to make records based on the merits of the final product itself, the result of probably too many hours of grueling work from Rockstar Games' own development staff around the world. Part of what will make Red Dead Redemption 2 so memorable is tied to how robust and full of life the in-game world is. Though it must be said that as much as the people in the side quests can be straight-laced, there are some characters sprinkled around Red Dead Redemption 2. This video will cover some of the most outlandish personalities in the game, from the creepy to the goofy to the ones that defy description. Here are 15 weird characters found in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Just get out of here.
Why?
I said, just get out of here.
Listen, partner. I'm waiting on the lady. She's a fine lady. She's just gone inside. If I wasn't waiting on this lady, you'd be dead already.
The Vampire. There are 5 clues written on walls that can lead Arthur Morgan to a vampire. Once having found all of the clues, their map locations form a star, which ironically point to a church as the vampire's hiding place. He can only be encountered at night, and while killing him is an option, it is also possible to talk to him, though he will attempt to attack first. The conversation doesn't really lead anywhere, and this vampire doesn't really appear to be all that creepy, but for the dark ambiance and the shady adventure that led to finding him, this encounter might not strike many as particularly scary until you realize that he can kill you with one knife attack, so be prepared. Feral Man. The Feral Man lives in a cave in the Roanoke Woods, howling when a full moon is out as is custom to the lore of wolves. You can find him out in the wilderness, but he'll run away if confronted. Tail him to his hideout as he runs away. There are wolves surrounding the area in which he lives, and he'll send them to attack Arthur. Once the player finally intrudes on his cave, he will tell him to leave. The wannabe wolf won't really put up a fight against Arthur. The interior of the cave is pure darkness, marked by some tents that house some belongings. The Feral Man possesses a journal that he writes into called the Runaway Diary. Investigate the cave for an item called Wild Man's Journal to read it. The writings seem to indicate someone who is rather infantile, but it also explains how he ended up in his unique lifestyle arrangement. Gunsmith owner in RHODES. If circling and looking around the gun store in RHODES, eventually while looking below, we'll notice an open vent and what appears to be a young boy asking for help through the bars of the vent. He remarks that he is chained to a bed. You can choose to rob the store, and will also eventually be able to enter the basement where the boy is located. Speaking generally about the basement before entering, the store owner will say that the son is sleeping down in the basement per his direction. It turns out that the boy is actually a grown adult, a youngish adult man. Upon entering the room, the young man yells at the store owner to stay away from him, but is relieved at the sight of Arthur Morgan. You learn from the store owner that he apparently lost his real son in a hunting accident, attempting to demonstrate firing a rifle, and decided to replace him with the young man chained to the bed. It's really a sad story for the young man who was locked away. The Nightfolk People. The Nightfolk People are a gang of killers who can be found in the swamps around Bayou Noir in the Blue Water Marsh. They can be stylistically described as zombies because they don't speak, they communicate via grunts and other noises. They do, however, prey upon their victims through ruses, sometimes casting one of their female group members as a damsel in distress, luring in unwitting victims to be killed and to have their belongings stolen. They attack with melee weapons and bows, and have a disheveled appearance. Ride around the area until you see a woman crying alone near a small fire at night. If you approach her, Arthur Morgan will try to provide her with some solace, but she will attack you and run away. You will then be attacked by the Nightfolk People, a few of them, and in more than one wave. Braithwaite's imprisoned woman. Locked in a wooden outhouse west of the Braithwaite Manor, she screams at Arthur various crazed things about wanting to leave, being willing to be intimate with him, and other miscellany, including a long sequence of numbers with thus far no known logic to them. The outhouse is locked up by ropes of chains, and the door to the outhouse has a crescent moon symbol carved out. She is coherent but crazed. If you return later in the game, at least after having completed a major story segment involving the Braithwaite Manor, all that remains in her place is a skeleton. There is no known way to save her or engage in a more meaningful conversation. Magnifico the Magician. Magnifico is a magician, part of a traveling group of performers. You encounter him as a part of a side quest wherein you have to chase him a few times on request from Miss Marjorie, the presumed leader of Miss Marjorie's medical miracle act. Magnifico is of diminutive stature and has an interesting mustache. His personality is comical and impish. When you approach him to ask him if he's Magnifico, Magnifico understands that you may be trying to convince him to return to Miss Marjorie and loudly and immediately rejects the idea. He disappears in a loud puff of colored smoke, or, well, maybe he doesn't disappear, but he quickly runs away and occasionally leaves smoke clouds. Treat them as trails that you must follow, but sometimes he'll do misdirecting things like leave multiple smoke clouds behind him at the same time. And he'll appear in trees, but the point of this side quest is to follow him rather than catch him, as after enough chasing, Miss Marjorie will apprehend him. BERTRAM. Magnifico's retrieval is part of a side quest that also involves corralling another member of the previously described troupe. This other person's name is BERTRAM. BERTRAM is much bigger in stature. He's with Miss Marjorie at the saloon at the Van Horn trading post. He has a temperamental personality and Arthur must fight him. Only after his defeat does he become obedient and listen to Arthur and Miss Marjorie. Do note that Bertram's attacks deal a lot of damage and he has a lot of health. Both him and Magnifico are part of Miss Marjorie's medical miracle act, although the trio are a rather messy collection of personalities, don't you think? King of the Forest. Wander around the Roanoke Ridge and you may hear a man loudly shouting at you to go away, unhappy with Arthur Morgan being present in his space. The source of this yelling should be a man hanging out in a tree not too high above the ground, though he'll be difficult to distinguish as he blends in amongst forest shadow and the darkness of tree bark. As you approach, he also makes a lot of noise about not being scared in case Arthur needs convincing. Arthur responds in ways that suggest that he doesn't find the man threatening and treats him as a joke. But the self-described King of the Forest tells you to leave. If you point weapons at him, he'll loudly ask that you not do that. But he also taunts you if you put your weapon away. Miss a shot, then he'll tell you to go away again. Do nothing, and the King of the Forest will just continue to insult Arthur. He generally just spouts a lot of delusional stuff, and will even talk about the difficulty of being a king. You can kill him if you so choose, freeing his subjects from his tyranny. Prisoners in chains. There's a random encounter with a prisoner in chains who asks you to shoot the shackles off of his legs. You can elect to do this, or you can choose to hog time and turn him into the sheriff. If you opt for the latter, then you'll be paid off by the sheriff. But be aware that some sheriffs may think you are kidnapping somebody while on your way to turn in the criminal. Successfully turning the convict in will net you a cash reward. Helping him will give you a tip about a house to burglarize and will also boost your honor. Honor among thieves, as they say. Incidentally, it is possible for a freed prisoner to be later found in shackles again, and if you take too long to free him, he may just run away. Homeless veteran Mickey. There's a homeless man sitting down outside of a building entrance. He says that he is too old to get a job and alludes to losing a friend in the American Civil War, the sort of uniform you see him wearing. He asks for a hug from Arthur Morgan, and if you oblige him, in the process of hugging him, he will steal from you. You can choose your response to what he says. Some of the questions he asks include what your name is and whether or not he can hug you. If you reject his hug, Arthur will say that he has a woman, but he will still try to continue your chat, and you can ask him about his deceased friend. That same man can be encountered a few times later in the game. Initially, he takes on a very loud and flattering angle, attempting to butter up Arthur, and that flattery is maintained if you allow him to hug you and steal from you. His final possible encounter with you, if you find him, will be markedly different from the previous conversations. Nigel, who is looking for his friend Gavin. Among the colorful cast of mysterious side characters in the game is a man from England named Nigel who is looking for his friend Gavin. Part of the appeal of Nigel's story is that there's no conclusion to this saga and not much background information to learn. This, in conjunction with the apparent outlandish randomness of the situation, makes the side quest compelling. You can't actually find Gavin in-game, and there's not much to the story that's actually interactable, but there is a self-contained short vignette wherein a letter on Nigel's person, called the Letter from Nigel to Tom, readable only if you kill Nigel, reveals that Nigel and Gavin, whoever they are, have been posturing themselves as millionaires, living a lavish life in a mansion with servants in America to their families. Contrary to this, all we know of Nigel, wherever he is found, is that he is desperately searching for Gavin. The Serial Killer. There is a serial killer that has been haunting the world of Red Dead Redemption 2, and stopping him is a side quest in the game. The serial killer leaves 3 clues in the form of severed heads on pikes along with marked map pieces placed in their mouths. The scenes that he leaves behind are very gruesome, with dismembered limbs and blood scattered about. The clue locations are also not centralized, though they are fixed, so be prepared to travel around the world map. The pieced together map clues will direct who may be attempting to find him to a previously unmarked underground hideout in the wilderness called Lucky Cabin. When first entering the hideout, the player will be able to control Arthur and investigate the lair, but as you do so, the serial killer will knock you out. This is a side quest that does ultimately result in the serial killer's capture, but you can choose whether or not to turn him in to the sheriff's office or to kill him yourself. A letter you can read after capturing the serial killer reveals him to be a man named Edmund, who possesses unstable nerves and apparently is psychologically dependent on his mother. Sonny. Sonny is a character who lives alone in a cabin who promises you food and welcomes you into his cabin in the woods. What happens afterwards is that he knocks you out as you progress into the cabin. A cutscene then loads, very brief, wherein he talks about you struggling after having been knocked out, and then you black out again later. The recollection sequence is trippy and a bit hazy. You later wake up away from the cabin with hunger, stamina, and dead-eye cores drained. We are meant to infer that Sonny is some sort of cannibal or drank your blood. Some of your money is also taken from you. Once the sequence has taken place, you can return to the cabin later and investigate it for items. The Hermit. This character is found in Manito Glade, north of Annisburg. He lives alone in a cabin in the woods and apparently is quite happy there, marked with no trespassing or keep out signs. The Hermit apparently doesn't like visitors, among which would be a man named Arthur Morgan. As you approach past a certain range, he will first issue a warning to leave his property, and once Arthur Morgan is close enough to the front door, he will come out of the cabin and start firing at the player. He also has possession of a torn treasure map piece, part of which will yield a unique weapon called Otis Miller's revolver. Not especially strong or difficult to take down, but he will still fire at Arthur. Killing him is essential to acquiring the map piece. And that closes our video on some of the most bizarre characters in Red Dead Redemption 2. Thankfully or not, none of them are main characters within the plot developments of the game, and none of them are certainly playable. It may be amusing to imagine what it would be like to have one of these characters as influential agents in the plot itself, or even to maybe play as one of them. Though considering that some of these characters simply hide away, the player may not have a lot of options. In any case, we at Gaming Bolt hope you enjoyed this video and are appreciative of you watching it. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.